Hey everybody, we're the Benchwarmers. I'm Jamie. I'm here with my co-host Gabe. Gabe, how you doing, buddy?
You know, I came straight to this recording from my fantasy football draft. I'm doing quite good. I was able to draft both Jerry Jeudy, who is not Jewish but wears a Magen David, and Adonai Mitchell, who I've been looking forward to drafting for a long time.
That's really funny that you actually drafted him. I don't know if he's on the fantasy roster for most teams.
No,
but it's nice that
I'm in
go for it
a league for the real perverts. Right. Like a real deep, a 16-person, 18 roster spot league. So we get into the WR3s, WR4s pretty quickly.
That's really exciting. Before we talk a little football, we should mention that we have an interview coming up on the back half of this episode with Alana Schreiber.
Alana's a rare returning guest.
Yeah, I was going to say one of few returning guests, but very excited to have her on. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make the interview, but Gabe, you and she discussed Jewish Paralympians and lots of talk about the Paralympics, and I'm excited to listen to the interview along with everybody else. Before we get to that, let's talk a little football preview and some other Paralympic and Olympic wrap up. It's sort of end of summer, can be a bit of a doldrums. We took a little bit of a break as dealing with
dog days.
The dog days, yeah. But it is certainly the worm has turned on the weather here, at least up in the Great Lakes region. And it feels like football season. I think there's something in the air.
I think that like the Midwest has come all of us. We've gone from brat summer to brat fall. The grills are fired up. The tailgates are happening. We're moving into football season. A few years ago, I guess it was 2015. Roughly, Jamie and I we traveled down the 401 to Ann Arbor for a Michigan football game.
Versus Northwestern, no less. Quite a Jewish
it was
school.
Against Northwestern.
Yeah.
Big ups to Claire Nalvin for showing us around Ann Arbor that weekend. We've done that's the fall vibe we're trying to create here. It is college football. It is friendship. It is sweaters. It is colors. It is maize and blue. It is very nice.
Yeah. And unfortunately, we don't have much good news on the Jewish football front this year. So
there are zero Jews in the NFL, unfortunately.
Yeah. Shout out to Jake Gervis from Jewish Telegraph, who publishes the Jewish Sport Report every week. He had a good rundown on how the Jews who could have made the NFL rosters this year didn't make it. So I'm just going to echo what he said. Really the main, at least from a fantasy perspective, position player that we've talked about in the last couple of years is A.J. Dillon, running back for the Green Bay Packers. Unfortunately, injured his neck and was put on the IR for the entire season.
He broke his neck.
Yeah.
And he's out for the entire season.
So real bummer.
Godzilla is done.
He is still very much active on social media, streaming video games. That's his other main hobby, I would say.
Yep.
So there's still plenty of A.J. Dillon content to go around, but unfortunately won't be on the gridiron this year. Alongside that, there's Anthony Ferkser, who played briefly last year with the Lions, who's on the Jets roster this year, tight end who was cut. Jake Curran, offensive tackle, again, who's been on the Bears in the past. He was cut from their practice squad. And Michael Dunn, a lineman for the Browns, who was put on the IR and may return after 4 games. So he is someone to watch that may be there.
He's a maybe. Also, currently, the kicker revolving door seems to happen a lot, but Greg Joseph is currently without a contract.
Yeah, he was on the Packers roster until the last cuts, and then was cut just this past a few days ago, and isn't kicking right now. It is often for like kickers like 33 through 40 to get a shot at some point in the year. There's some rotation, but we'll see.
He was also, he was 94% on PATs last year, 80% on field goals. Like these are legit NFL starter numbers.
Right.
We can expect him to get signed as soon as somebody double doinks a field goal. He's probably one of the first calls. Greg Joseph is, which is, we'll be there to let you guys know if and when that happens.
And one more guy I want to mention who has some Jewish heritage. I don't know if he identifies, but Keaton Slovis, a quarterback previously at BYU and started at USC for a couple of years, wasn't drafted, but was on the Colts practice squad as an undrafted free agent, was cut, but was signed to the Texans practice squad and is on the Texans practice squad. So, if there's some injury to the QBs 1 through 3 for the Texans, he could easily be moved up.
Absolutely.
that makes me want to talk about another BYU quarterback, Jake Retzlaff, who is, as we've talked about before, sort of astonishingly the quarterback for the extremely Mormon BYU Cougars. And they won their first game. He had a solid game, going 20 for 30. A little bit of an easy opponent against Southern Illinois. But it is a weird college football year. There's 12 teams that are going to make the playoffs this year. So you never know. A BYU team that wins out certainly would have a shot. Winning the Big 12 or coming in second in the Big 12 would certainly give them a shot, given that they're in the Big 12 sort of diminished in terms of who it has, but nevertheless, if you got to imagine 12. If you win the Big 12, you'll make the playoff for sure. If you come in second, maybe depending on how many losses you have, certainly possible.
One other thing I think this is interesting, maybe not necessarily interesting for many other people. In sort of the Keaton Slovis world, he went to, at least in Phoenix, he went to Desert Mountain High School in Scottsdale, which is very close to where my dad lives.
Oh, okay.
Sort of a North Scottsdale high school that is in a somewhat Jewish area.
Your dad, I think your dad should become a high school football booster,
I think
adopt
so,
a team
yeah.
and go to Friday night games.
So he lives really close to a school called Notre Dame, which is a really big football school in Scottsdale, which is extremely not Jewish and quite private. But I think he would do very well at exactly. I think the school he would probably choose is Desert Mountain, which is right around the corner from his house. So I think that would be the right one. But
if he starts being a fan, he can identify any Jews on the roster who may have a chance to make it one of the.
Now that
Arizona
the Coyotes
schools
are gone, he's going to need somewhere to go to. That's a great idea.
Gabe, I know that you and Alana talked about Jews at the Paralympics. I just wanted to take an opportunity to talk a little bit about Israel's performance at the 2024 Paralympics. Matching the Olympic performance this year, this has been a great Paralympics for Israel as well. They've won seven medals now, and there's an eighth that is on the way. It's not the most that they've won. I think they've had better performances in the past, just given the sort of history of the Paralympics and who's participating. But still, given its size and the amount of athletes who are around, it's still a very impressive performance. And we'll see how many medals they end up with. And I want to highlight that as we're speaking currently, the Israeli women's goalball team made it into the finals of that tournament. And that game is going to happen on Thursday, September 5th. So if the outcome may already be out before you listen to this, but they're playing Turkey in the finals after beating China 2-1. They're going to get either a gold or silver medal, and it's their first time making it this far. It's their first time making it to the finals of any sort of Olympics or World Championship in the women's goalball, and it's just incredibly impressive. I would say it's a sport that is played by blind athletes and by people with vision impairment, but everyone's blindfolded, and nevertheless makes an excellent spectator sport. It is incredibly amazing to watch.
It's extremely cool. Blind soccer is as well. It's extremely cool as well.
Goalball sort of similar. It's not exactly. I wouldn't say soccer is exactly the right term. It's sort of like an indoor futsal is maybe the better way to think about it. But it's amazing to watch, and I think the Israeli goalball team has really come a long way based on my reading of it. And again, just making it to the finals here is incredibly impressive.
Oh, it's. I mean, one thing we talk about with Alana, and we can talk about this now, but just the spectacle of the Paralympics and the incredible ability of otherwise sort of of athletes with disabilities and para athletes it's quite amazing. Not only have they sort of come through challenges to be there to begin with, but they're the best in the world.
Yeah.
So the performances are really spectacular, and huge kudos to Team Israel. And all their athletes and their 8 medals, as well as Canadian American athletes that we discuss on the show later. It's a great chat.
Yeah, I don't know if you spoke about para table tennis gold medalist Ian Seidenfeld. But he was profiled on Heilma. Yep. He won a gold in Tokyo, I think, and is in contention right now.
I'm coached by his gold medalist father as well.
Amazing. Love the Jewish sports heritage.
Exactly. And I don't want to bury the lead or don't want to spoil Alana's, but we have sort of a LeBron and Bronny or Ken Griffey Jr. and Senior story coming up to deal with Ian Seidenfeld. So stay tuned for that as we get on to the show.
I read an idea online that I think, I'm not sure if it makes sense, but I think it might, which is to put the Paralympics in front of the Olympics instead of afterwards. I think that there is, unfortunately, some downside to coming after the Olympics in terms of just, I don't want to say fatigue, but people have tuned into an international sporting event for a while. They've seen it. And I don't know that there's necessarily as much appetite as spectators. Whereas I think if you put it in front of the Olympics, that, I don't know, it might change the perspective a little bit. And I think, getting more visibility for all the Paralympic athletes, not a bad thing.
I'm curious to see if it would work. I think something we talk about in the interview, and we'll get there, is sort of the idea of the Paralympics as the main event. Like the Olympics, a lot of Paralympic athletes and para sport fans see the Olympics as the warm up, and the Paralympics is the main event. And I think the Paralympians and the Paralympic movement is a little worried about being seen as the warm up. I agree with you now that currently they're seen as the afterthought, which isn't right and isn't, it's a disservice to the athletes themselves. So I think it's probably worth experimenting. But I think if you are interested, and if you're not, you should be. The Paralympics are their own event that stand out spectacularly. They're amazing. I love watching the Paralympics. We've seen a lot of really amazing Paralympic stories going through right now. I mean, we talk in the show about, we talk in the interview about the success of murder ball as a sport, wheelchair rugby, commonly known as murder ball, that's achieved some mainstream success. You see often the incredible abilities of archers who perform with their feet or swimmers with one hand, or, as we saw the Canadian shot put gold medalist who competes with a missing hand. It's really, really remarkable. And I think that the shadow of the Olympics is both a good lead in, but also I agree with you, it might be stealing some of the thunder.
Mm-hmm. Gabe, just touching back on the Olympics for a second, you wanted to talk about American-Israeli wrestler Amita Lor, who we talked about before. She won a gold medal. She is dominant. She dominated the 68 kilogram wrestling competition, coming down a weight class and still just, really just leveling the competition. She's been facing some real anti-Semitic, abuse online. I don't know if there's a better
I think
word
it's probably the right way to
hatred.
Put it. I think being a sort of public and notable Jew sort of opens you up to the vox populi, which I think any Jewish person knows is not necessarily the friendliest to Jewish people, generally speaking, altogether. And one thing she has started doing is sort of maybe name and shame is the wrong word, but sort of calling out the anti-Semitic comments you get and sharing with it and explaining sort of how it affects her as a person, not necessarily as a competitor or as, I would say, one of the toughest people to physically challenge in the world.
Right.
But also, somebody who is also a human and a Jewish person who is sensitive to both hatred and, cares to be a proud Jewish person in the world. One thing I think is very interesting, she is in a committed relationship with a Brazilian jiu-jitsu fighter who is currently the world champion, won the world championship. They're a matching world championship couple. I think they called them the first couple of grappling.
Yeah, definitely would be like first overall pick in any couple fight.
Yes, exactly.
Fight of any sort.
Mikel Galvão is his name. He is a Brazilian jiu-jitsu. He is a Catholic, but he is very much, at least seems to embrace the life of a Jewish partner. They're baking challah together on Instagram. They are talking about Israel. They're enjoying. They met on Instagram, which is very cute. I think very Gen Z of them. And it's extremely cool to see sort of this couple, this like multi-faith couple embracing Jewish culture in the face of anti-Semitism that they face literally on a daily basis.
And I really just, I want to talk about her, and we've talked about her a number of times, but I find her, very heartening and fascinating and a great role model, because I think she is doing something that is not typically something that we think of, or typically something that women have been excluded from, combat sports, wrestling, not something that we typically associate with Jewish athletes. Obviously, there have been Jewish wrestlers, professional and otherwise, but it's a bit out of the box. And she's doing something significant in terms of not just being Jewish, but embracing it. I think there's lots of Jewish athletes who I respect that they can just exist in the world and don't have to deal with this, but highlighting that being that you're the victim of this sort of hatred is important. And I think it's important for Jewish sports fans to see, that this is something that everyone deals with, and
absolutely.
How to respond.
And she is literally, no one has physically overpowered her in 3.5 years.
Right.
Like, she is one of the toughest people and one of the strongest people literally on the planet. Of her weight class, she is number one in the world. There's no comparison to how tough of a person she is physically and mentally.
She's from Walnut Creek, and I think will be a big part of the LA Olympics. Like, I think she'll be there. She'll be representing, and she's not the only Californian, obviously, but I think as someone who is, just a remarkable athlete and
strong. She's already the strong favorite going into 2028, almost entirely.
Yeah, exactly. That, she's someone who will hopefully be very present over the next 4 years, and someone we can continue to watch in 2028 Olympics and beyond as well. Gabe, why don't we turn now to your interview with Ilana?
Absolutely.
Is life really miserable for the Jews, or are we just glued to a 24-hour news cycle?
Should we be worried that so many young rabbis are coming out of seminary as anti-Zionists?
And what does Judaism say about polyamory?
If you want answers to these questions, well, we don't have any. But we do love asking them. Each week, tune into Bonjour Chai to hear debates and hot takes by me, Avi Feingold.
And me, Phoebe Maltz-Bovey.
As we sit down with pundits, rabbis, and scholars to talk about the most pressing issues facing Jews in Canada and around the world.
Listen and subscribe to Bonjour Chai at thecjn.ca/bonjour or wherever you get your podcasts.
So we're back with a rare treat, a returning guest. Welcome back to the Benchwarmers, Ilana Schreiber.
So happy to be here. And worked out. Ultimate Frisbee practice was rained out. So here I am.
That's fantastic. We actually have an Ultimate episode from a few years ago. We had, I guess he used to be a national team coach, radio producer Jody Avergan, really nice guy.
Yeah. I grew up in Montclair, New Jersey, which is very close to Columbia High School in Maplewood, where Ultimate all began. So
so you know the whole story. I will say Joel Silver is on our Mount Rushmore of future guests. We're gonna get him one day. It's
absolutely.
We were told good luck on that get. But one of the things we are here to talk to Ilana about, as it's going on now, is sort of a under-heralded but equally impressive cousin of the Olympics, the Paralympics, that's going on in Paris right now, immediately after. Some people might say they have Olympic fatigue, but being sports nut bars, we do not. And would love to hear, Ilana, you were telling me before we started the show that there's a Jewish, I would say, founding story of the Paralympics. So start with that, please.
Well, absolutely. But before I get into that, I do want to say that I was so disappointed to learn Ethan Katzberg wasn't Jewish.
Yes.
My God, that killed me. I was so sure. I was watching him while I was in Iceland with my sister, and we were both like, "Oh, we got a hammer thrower now. We got all the sports." So
I know
that was really sad.
I think he would have won the award for largest Jewish person. Unfortunately, we've done the research. Mike did yeoman's work, our producer Michael, in calling and reaching out to several Jewish organizations in the West. That episode was probably our most popular SEO episode. A lot of people searching whether or not Ethan Katzberg was Jewish were met with the benchwarmers explaining that no, he was not, which is very disappointing for all of us. But it's about as close. We considered renaming the Mike Jacobs All-Star team after Ethan Katzberg. Strongly considered it.
I think so. I mean, I will say though, I got to mention one Jewish Olympian who you guys somehow didn't mention, but that is okay, is Jesse Grouper, the rock climber.
Oh, we talked about Jesse Grouper.
He's my childhood friend. We've known each other since we were like 4 years old.
No way.
Yeah.
We did talk about him.
I did not catch that. Okay, well then huge apologies on my
no
behalf,
worries.
But
I thought he should change his name to Gripper.
I'll tell him that. He's actually the funny story about Jesse is we ended up, we grew up in Montclair, New Jersey together, but we went to different colleges and both wound up studying abroad in Cape Town, South Africa. And we were there for Rosh Hashanah and we're like, we should do something. So we found this service in a high school gym, and the high school gym across the walls was like the history of the South African Jewish rugby players on the Springboks.
Oh, that's amazing.
Was incredible. And then I later found out that would include Louis Spavro, who is the great-grandfather of Sarah Levy, who's currently on the U.S. women's rugby team that just won bronze.
No way.
So that's a really exciting pipeline, I think.
I mean, that's fantastic. There's a good history of South African Jewish athletes. There's a rugby referee. His name is Jonathan something, but he is the referee who has reffed the most international rugby games ever. Is a Jewish guy from South Africa.
Wow, that's awesome.
As well as a cricket player named Matt Zondecki. So there's a few, but that's really great to know. That's awesome. There's a few,
when Alana Schreiber was on the University of Cape Town Ultimate Frisbee team for a semester.
Wow.
Let's not forget.
That's quite. Do you still have that jersey? I see. I mean, this is an auditory medium, so you can't see it, but Alana has a lot of jerseys behind her. I can see a Sandy Koufax jersey, an Alex Bregman jersey, what might be Mark Ingram, who I don't think was Jewish, or Brandon Ingram, maybe.
It's Brandon Ingram, Pelicans jersey.
A Pelicans jersey. And then Nolan Ryan and David Wright. Are those the other two?
Yes, and Kansas City Monarchs jersey.
Yes, a Kansas City Monarchs jersey.
I couldn't, for whatever reason, eBay didn't have a version that just like said Satchel Paige's last name on it. So I just got a standard Monarchs jersey, but it's a Satchel Paige jersey. Still
extremely cool. And is there anything that links together all of the jerseys behind you other than players, presumably, that you are a fan of?
A lot of them were gifts.
Okay.
Not all of them. So but I think, a lot of them are things people have given me, which I really appreciate. And I also want to say that the Bregman jersey is his LSU jersey, not his Astros jersey.
Yeah.
So it's nice to have that on the wall for, Louisiana pride. And I do have a few other jerseys in the closet, and sometimes I rotate them because, I don't want the jerseys getting jealous.
Well, the podcast background has to be, I've told the story on the show before, but this is a really good Jewish dad story. My dad is from New York. He grew up in Queens. Mets obsessive, has been forever. And he once met Jim Fregosi, who was the manager of the Blue Jays and the Phillies for a while. And he met Jim Fregosi at a baseball event, and I was there, and he walked straight up to Jim Fregosi and said, "I have never forgotten that the Mets traded Nolan Ryan for you." And he was probably he straight up said this to him, and Jim Fregosi just walked away. Just without saying a word, just left the conversation.
That reminds me of when George Bush was asked about his biggest career regrets, and he was like, "Oh, trading Sammy Sosa," and they were like, "No, we mean as president."
Yeah, as president, yeah, exactly, exactly like that. Okay, we are getting off topic. Yeah. We are kibitzing a little too much. That's fine. That's the way the podcast goes. But I'd love to hear. Let's head back to the Paralympics.
Yes.
You mentioned you have a wonderful story about the founding of such. Take us through it.
Absolutely. And I do want to, preface that I am by no means an expert on any of this. I am just a massive Paralympic fan. I started getting really into the games last time around when at the time I was sight guiding a lot for a blind runner in Colorado who's actually Jewish, Dan Berlin. Our grandparents were both named Irv and Dottie.
Oh, wow.
And we were running buddies, and, running with him, guiding him a lot made me interested in starting to watch Paralympic sports. So I watched a ton of guide running. I got really into wheelchair rugby because my college friend's older brother is the captain of the U.S. team, which is a big rivalry with Canada.
Oh, wow.
So, and I've interviewed athletes. I've done some stories. I've, read books, watched documentaries, but I'm like the furthest thing from an expert on this. But
and that wheelchair rugby is also commonly known as murder ball, in case anyone wondered if it wasn't intense enough.
Exactly. And there's a great documentary called Murder Ball. But yeah, I was actually in Paris, caught the end of the Olympics, and then the days after the Olympics, walking around and stumbled upon the Pantheon, and there was this exhibit on the Paralympic history. And it turns out that it's very Jewish. So it all began with a man named Ludwig Guttmann. So he was from Germany, born in 1899. And by the early 30s, he's working as a neurosurgeon, but then he's expelled from his university under the 1933 Nuremberg laws. And he was banned from practicing medicine, but he was still allowed to keep working at the Jewish hospital in Breslau. So he moves to Breslau. And then on the night of Kristallnacht, I actually saw this video, where he said he was driving to the synagogue and then he saw it on fire. He sees what's happening and immediately he goes to the hospital. He orders all of his staff to just admit any patient without question. And the next day, the Gestapo comes to the hospital and he goes case by case to each bed, explaining why each patient needs to be there. And he was actually able to save 60 out of the 64 patients from arrest or deportation. So, saved a lot of people in more ways than one. And by 1939, Guttmann and his family, they fled to London by way of Portugal. And when he arrived in Oxford with his wife and his 2 kids, he continued as a neurosurgeon. And then a few years later, when a lot of veterans were returning home from war, he was tasked with establishing the first national spinal injury center at the Stoke Mandeville Hospital. And at the time, that was a job no one wanted. Patients with spinal cord injuries had really limited life expectancies, and people just thought it was kind of too dark. And at this time, there was obviously more people than usual with these kinds of injuries, considering most are returning veterans. So he sets up this hospital, and one thing that would limit people's life expectancies was really just that they weren't being rotated enough. And he just was like, hey, people aren't going to die of bed sores if we rotate them every 2 hours. And he would stay at the hospital every 2 hours to rotate patients. And then by 1945, he organized the first ever Stoke Mandeville Games. Specifically at this time, it was for veterans who had become disabled in war. And they actually had it the same day as the London Olympics, and which, were in London that year. And at the time, it was this way to offer physical rehabilitation and boost patient morale. So it was seen as more of this kind of both a physical and also mental and spiritual rehab. But then by 1952, you have more than 130 competitors had entered the game, and they're coming from all across the country. It's no longer just veterans, and it grows and grows and grows. And by the 1960s, for the first time, the Stoke Mandeville Games were actually held in Rome alongside the Olympics. And that's really what people look at as when it became the Paralympics that it is today. So it's really become this incredible event that attracts now these highly skilled competitive athletes at the absolute top of their game from across the country. And then I think one of the really sweet things I want to mention is just that Ludwig's daughter, Eva, is actually still alive. And she's known as the longest serving Paralympic volunteer. She began volunteering in 1948. And at the London 2012 Olympic Games, which many see as a turning point for the Paralympics in terms of the kind of reach and the coverage and the way it was advertised as thanks for the warm-up Olympics, but here's the main event. She was actually the one of the first flame carriers, and the torch made its way from Stoke Mandeville Hospital, where it all began, to London. And she's just been really committed to preserving her father's legacy. So yeah.
I don't mean to be reductive, but I think a lot of the stories about Jewish sports eventually come back to a doctor.
I think that's pretty fair.
Yes. Yeah. And that certainly happened now. Something I think a lot of people don't realize about the Paralympics specifically, at least especially in Canada, is that the Summer Paralympics are actually larger in terms of athletes and sports than the Winter Olympics even. So this is a major, major sporting event that's, if next to the Olympics, the largest athletic competition in the world.
Yeah. And I mean, people ask me why I love the Paralympics so much. And because I'm at work, I have 2 computers, I'm procrastinating, and they're split screen. I'm watching, we've got bocce and archery over here, and we've got sitting volleyball and, you know, track and field over here. Like, I'm just watching everything. And I think there's a lot of reasons. And of course, you know, one of them being that oftentimes Paralympic athletes have had to overcome so much more to be able to be to where they are, not just in terms of their, you know, what they may have been through. That's not to say necessarily everyone's been through trauma, but, you know, just way more obstacles.
There's difficulty for sure. For sure.
But a lot of that is also just like, not just difficulty life, but just difficulty in terms of like getting enough money, enough sponsorships, getting to the games. I heard apparently that like in Rio, a bunch of athletes' wheelchairs were just lost in the airport for 3 days and, you know, like things like that. But then also I think just the availability of it. You know, I love baseball, and when I want to watch the Mets, I know 162 games exactly when I can do that. And when the Paralympics, a lot less opportunity to watch these sports. So when they're on, I just take advantage of all of it.
Oh, and I would say there's also something, you know, getting to the Olympics for anybody, the Paralympics especially, it is a rare achievement in somebody's life. And as you mentioned earlier, even competing, you know, the ethos of the Olympics is not to win, but to compete. And I think the Paralympics really fits a big part of that as well. To that same effect, just because it's, you know, the point of this podcast is to note certain competitors. Can you tell us a little bit about some Jewish Paralympians that have either had success in the first week of the games or something to watch out for, you know, next week before the games end?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, obviously a lot of attention's been given to Ezra Freck. I mean, back-to-back golds. He definitely surprised himself winning the 100 meters, but the high jump was really cool to watch. And I mean, he's like 19. So this guy has a huge future ahead of him. And I was so excited also just to see, like, he had 60 friends and family there supporting him. He had a huge entourage. So that was pretty incredible. But then one of my favorite stories is actually about Ian Seidenfeld, a para table tennis player. So his dad, Mitch, was actually a para table tennis player as well. And I'll say they're Minnesota Jews, and I went to college in Minnesota. So, you know, they also identify as the Frozen Chosen over there.
Oh,
so
yes, of
course. So that warms my heart. But so his dad was a former para table tennis player, and his dad is like his coach, and you see them like in between points talking on the sidelines. It's so sweet to like watch them communicate together. They have the sweetest dynamic. But what's also special is Mitch played at the, you know, one of his old teammates was Tal Leibovitz in the 90s in Atlanta, and Tal Leibovitz is still playing table tennis. It's his like 5th or 6th Paralympics or something. He discovered table tennis while he was homeless actually in New York at a Boys and Girls Club, and just fell in love with it. And so, you know, this guy, Tal, has played with the father and the son. You know, it's like, you know, people who've played with both Griffeys, I guess.
Absolutely.
But it's, you know, but then both the other sweet thing.
LeBron and Bronny, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly. It's that version. But Ian Seidenfeld and Tal Leibovitz were actually also on a duo team together for doubles table tennis, which, as far as I know, is like the only like Jewish doubles I've seen. But they did not move
since
past the early
Ehrlich and
rounds,
Rahm have we seen any sort of doubles. That's a deep cut on the, you know, field tennis.
Honestly, yeah. So
I mean, that's extremely cool. I want to double down on Ezra Freck just for a second. You know, as of this recording, he's already won 2 medals, 2 gold medals at the Paralympics, reigning world champion in both the high jump and the 100 meters, I think. But something I think is notable about him, which is not a particularly, I would say, common Jewish result, is he has sort of an ambition and a verve for the spotlight that a lot of Jewish athletes don't necessarily have. He's on the record of saying, I want to be the best athlete in the world. You know, I want to be a crossover superstar, which is sort of, I feel like we have a reputation as people from shying away from the spotlight. You have people like, oh, I don't know, your Jessica Foxes who have incredible success without being mainstream famous. But here's someone who expresses their goal to actually be mainstream famous and continue to do so, which is extremely cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that with Ezra, you know, as much as he, you know, talks himself up all the, you know, oh, like his countdown. I've been following his Instagram forever, and it was 37 days till I win Paralympic gold. His swag. I think at the same time he's really vocal. Like, listen, I would give these medals up if that meant broad disability inclusion across the board. So he still has this really strong message when it comes to inclusion, when it comes to adaptive sports, and I mean, I think I love it. There is something that's like, I think there's. It's not, I don't think it's the Jewish part of him. I think it's the LA part of him that has all this like promotional kind of swag to him.
Yeah, he's got the California vibe as well.
Yeah. He's going to USC next year. Like,
oh, that's fantastic. I'm sure he is going to be extremely popular, I am sure.
Yeah, they did some interview and they're like, so when do you start classes? And he's like, last week I still got to email my professors. Crap. Like,
right. Yeah. I'm too busy winning gold medals. He'll find a way to talk. I did also want to mention, we've talked previously, we've covered Auburn basketball, which is a notable Jewish team. But we've also got some Jews on the American wheelchair basketball team. With star Peter Barry, who is, was won gold medal at the Pan Am Games last year, or sorry, I should say the Para Pan Am Games last year, and plays for Alabama wheelchair basketball. I would say one of the handful of Jews in Tuscaloosa at any given time.
Actually, Tuscaloosa has a ZBT. So
really?
Yeah, Bama has a ZBT. So I have a couple Jewish friends, born and raised in the South. And it is funny because for a lot of folks, when they're choosing LSU, Ole Miss, or Bama, they all choose Bama because that is, regarded as the most Jewish out of all of them because of the Jewish fraternity, which I think is so interesting. But it's like, again, if, my friend who grew up in Lexington, Mississippi is the one Jewish kid was like, where I'm going to like really feel at home is Bama. So, but yeah, Peter Barry on the wheelchair basketball team. And let me just say, like, the wheelchair basketball team, I mean, pretty much most of them, men and women, you go to Bama, Illinois, I think University of Wisconsin, Whitewater, and like Arizona are kind of the main feeders. But Bama has a huge presence. I think it's at least like, I know on the women's team, at least 4 of them, probably similar numbers on the men's team. But Peter Barry is, he's young. He's not in the starting lineup, but I think he's totally got a future with this team. Yep. And so does his younger brother, Aaron. They were actually both had a spinal cord injury in a car accident when they were younger. And I think that would be so cool in LA to see like 2 Jewish brothers on the court. And I mean, wheelchair basketball is so much fun to watch. I love watching it. Especially the women today, their win against Great Britain was really exciting. But that is, I think that's kind of one of the nice things too about this Paralympics is there's a lot of like young Jewish athletes who, are really going to be like having their moments in LA.
That's true. And I think Ezra Freck being the hometown guy is sort of like at least for the American story. He is the, how do I say this? He's going to be like the toast of the Brentwood Country Club. When that time comes in LA. It's interesting. This is just a side. My mom this week was at my cousin's bar mitzvah at the Reseda Country Club, which was not quite as Tony as Brentwood, but the other Jewish country club in town. So I'm sure there's lots of nachas for Ezra Freck there and any other California Jew in the Paralympics or the Olympics for that matter.
I'm
sure. These stories are quite amazing. It's an incredibly inspiring sport to watch. Any sort of parasport. Canada, I don't think we have
Allison Levine.
Yes, Allison Levine. I was going to say she plays bocce, or as it's officially called, boccia. I think it's because it has the French language is the official language of the Olympics, the Olympic movement.
Which is how you get words like repechage.
Yes, exactly. So we have Allison Levine, who's currently ranked 2nd in the world, which we can expect hopefully to see a medal. I mean, watching people play boccia is amazing at the professional level in any sport or any competition. So we're cheering for her. But I feel like, like the international game for Jewish athletes, it's, as we said earlier, there's always a unifier between the audience and any Jewish athlete participating. And I think it's important and worthwhile to share that for the Paralympics. And we really appreciate you coming on to do that.
Absolutely. And, I just want to say, like, I have been given so much by the adaptive sports community, right? Like, I started running more seriously living in Colorado with my running buddy, Dan, that I mentioned. And he was the first one to say to me, like, hey, you could run a marathon, which was not something I was considering. But he, set me up with a training plan and a physical therapist. And it's really largely to him that I was able to qualify for the Boston Marathon. And then when I ended up running it, he was there and he came and he was the first person I saw when I crossed the finish line. So, athletes of all abilities and disabilities make everyone better athletes. And I owe so much to him and to, the visually impaired running community. And it's just, it's been a huge, exciting part of my life.
I didn't know you ran the Boston Marathon. That's extremely cool.
Thank you. I've done a few, but that one was really special, and hopefully would love to sight guide a race one day. I'm not sight guided a race, just like runs around town. But that's definitely high up on the bucket list.
It helps with ultimate training, or ultimate maybe helps with marathon training, which is very important stuff.
And you can think of Dina Castor, Jewish marathon hero.
There you go. People also think Canada is a Mike Jacobs All-Star. There's a Canadian marathoner named Cam Levin, who is not Jewish. And people often think he is. And he participated in the Olympics and came in some teen number. But no, it's still very exciting. We're thrilled to have you on the show, and we really appreciate you coming on to tell this story and share your experience with the para-athlete community.
Also, I just want to say, like, if anyone's interested in sight guiding, just go to unitedinstride.com. It's this really cool website where you find blind and visually impaired runners in your area and can match up based on, paces and what you like to get out of runs. And that's been a ton of fun. And there's always and there's so many adaptive sports communities that are really reliant on volunteers. I know blind soccer teams are always looking for folks to, just help pass them the ball, run drills. So there's tons of ways to for everyone to be involved. All right. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Of course.
Well, thanks again to Alana for joining us. That was, a great interview, and really nice to have Alana back on. I'm sure this won't be the last time that she's gracing our listeners' ears. Really, really great to have her on, and talking about a really interesting subject.
We could kibitz with her for ages.
Yeah, Gabe. As we're taping this, it's September 4th. I think it's very important and necessary for us to honor the anniversary tomorrow of the Munich Olympics hostage taking in 1972. This is 52 years now since that occurred. I think we've talked about it before, and there are episodes we've done before about the Munich massacre and the aftermath of that. I would say, we could always have an anniversary episode about it or talking about it. But I would, point out the previous podcast we did. Maybe we'll have links in our show page about it. And I would endeavor to suggest to people that they read about it, that they learn about that this should be among the Jewish stories that is passed down to our younger generations. And I should say as well that there is a movie apparently coming out in the not too distant future. It premiered at Venice Film Festival. It's called September 5. And it is about the ABC perspective, like the coverage of the Olympics and what went on there. I think it's sort of a mix of archival footage, Howard Cosell, and, Peter Sarsgaard plays Rune Arledge.
Wild casting.
It is. I would say that my first look at it suggests that there aren't a ton of Jews involved in the actual production of it, but Sean Penn, who I guess is sort of Jewish, is one of the producers. I guess Peter Sarsgaard is married to a Jewish woman who has certainly done things in the Jewish and Israel sphere before. The Honorable Woman, I guess. Is that a miniseries people watched? I watched some of that. Anyways, the point is, I haven't seen the movie. It just premiered at Venice a few days ago. I'm sure we'll cover it more and maybe talk to someone involved in the production as it gets closer to a release date. But I think it'll be an interesting thing to watch. I mean, obviously people are familiar with Munich, which sort of foregrounds the massacre and is more about the aftermath. But
also, I mean, Steven Spielberg made this, but also starring a number of non-Jews.
Yes, the again married to a Jew, Daniel Craig, and then the extremely Gentile Eric Bana.
Eric Bana, very much so.
Kieran Hins and I can't
Helen Mirren.
Yeah, no, she's not in it. She doesn't play Gold. It's a different movie. She plays Golda Meir.
Different movie. Okay, never mind.
Anyways,
I'm sorry. I confused my period dramas about Israeli revenge.
Yeah, that's right. There's only so many Golda Meir portrayals in the history of film.
Yes.
Anyways, that'll be interesting to keep an eye on, and we'll see if it comes out this year. It might be an Oscar movie. It might be something that people want to check out. But always important to remember the Munich massacre and honor the Israeli athletes and coaches who died as a result of that terrible terrorist attack. Sorry to leave it on such a somber note, but necessary to do. Thanks as always to our producer, Michael Fraiman, for producing us. We're brought to you by the Canadian Jewish News. You can find our podcast and articles and other things on the Canadian Jewish News' website, thecjn.ca. And feel free to follow us on Twitter at Menschwarmers. We're still, posting here and there. Twitter's a real hellscape, but we're out there.
We're posting. I'm off Twitter. Is it as bad as it seems?
If you're there, it's just me. Almost always just me, but
right.
Highlighting some Jewish sports news and stuff like that. It reminds me that if anyone knows why Trent Thornton is called the Big Dreidel, we're still looking for an answer on that.
Still looking for an answer on that. We've heard about it. We don't know. Sorry if you were coming to this episode expecting to hear why he's called the Big Dreidel. We don't know yet.
Yeah, hopefully we can get you guys that.
Get Larry Stone back on the horn. Maybe Larry Stone can tell us.
Yeah, that's right. In the unlikely event that Seattle makes the playoffs, he could be a part of that run, and we'll try to track down some Big Dreidel answers. But thanks again for listening, and you will hear us again soon.